You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cantina Cast. This is episode 246. And tonight, we'll be covering more of the Clone Wars legacy and taking a look back at the Crisis on Utapau episodes. My name's Albert Padilla, and with me tonight, hailing deep within a sinkhole on Utapau, is none other than Mr. Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome back, sir.
Thank you, sir. Having a good week so far?
I am having a very tiresome week this week so far.
More of the same, huh?
Yeah, more of the same. And this is we were talking before we came on the air about these episodes, and so for those of you that are just tuning in, this is now our third series, I guess our third or fourth now that we've done. So we're looking back at the Clone Wars legacy. We've got some other stuff still coming up, but this is one of those that when it first came out, it was released and everyone was kind of taken aback by it because of the way it was unfinished and all of that. But we're going to get into a lot more of the 4 episodes themselves and kind of really dissect what was kind of happening here and really pull out some of the meatier pieces. But before we go there, we've got a couple of things that we want to take care of in the way of news. And first and foremost, we're going to start with an announcement that we had. So last week we mentioned that the Cantina Cast and The Basement were now part of Ear Glue Media. And this is the podcast network that Mike Rondo has put together. So he has been working hard at that. And just very recently this week, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, that right. we announced a new show as part of the Ear Glue Media Network, and that is Bad Gamers Anonymous. So for those of you who are followers of the Cantina Cast, The Basement, or part of our Discord server, you know who Bad Gamers Anonymous is. This is Crowley and Garrick. They do a weekly podcast that's dedicated to helping gamers sack up and get good, to quote their tagline. So, but it's a really great, very funny gaming podcast. They do talk about games, and they kind of get into a lot of the back office stuff and what's happening in the media and publishing rights and anything that really affects gamers or could affect your gaming experience or even your pocketbook in the way of loot boxes, which is my favorite topic to discuss with them. Now, Jonesy, you've been on Bad Gamers Anonymous. I've only one episode talking about retro games, but I think you've been on a few more times than I have, and I think you've got one slated this week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I've been on there a handful of times. Usually I think one time we talked about sports games because I play a lot of sports games on PlayStation, and I think one time we did violence in video games. So it was kind of interesting roundtable. And then we're about to start talking about World of Warcraft. So, and
that's that's that new game that just came out, right? World of Warcraft.
Yeah, it just came out, brand new. Right. Yeah, Battle for Azeroth expansion finally hit for a very seasoned MMO. And we are nerds all around, folks. We are geek supreme, and we love every minute of it. So, yeah, excited to get back on the horn with Crowley and Garrick's absence and have a good show there. So invite everybody to come and check it out. They always have a great opinion. It's usually wrong, but we love it anyway. They're fun guys, and they wear their hearts on their sleeves, and they've got about 50 episodes now. So season show, it sounds great. We hope you go check it out.
Yeah, and it's doing really well. I know they've been kind of watching their downloads go up as people have been, word of mouth has been spreading. So we definitely want to do our share to plug and promote that show. So again, if you have an interest, a deep interest, or even just a loose interest, and you want a fun show about video games and what's kind of going on in the video game industry, please check them out. We'll put a link in the show notes so that you can do so. And to Crowley and Garrick, welcome aboard. Welcome to the team. We're excited to have you guys. It was kind of a no-brainer, so we're there. All right. Let's get to Star Wars news. We've got 2 things. And the first one, so you were talking about this, and I honestly have not had a chance to look at this, but this is the Solo, a Star Wars story novel expanded edition. And this is what we've been waiting for. I think there's some excerpts, I believe, on StarWars.com.
Right. Yeah. Some of the things that we were in our character breakdowns and dissections, we theorized some of the background story of what happened. And this novel looks like it's going to deliver on a few of those things that we were interested in. So there were 3 in particular that StarWars.com shared in some excerpts. And I won't go through it, but we'll kind of recap them briefly. So one is with Kira, which is right after she's captured, what happens to her and how does she meet Dryden Voss and how does that relationship kind of get spearheaded and what did that interaction and that, adjustment period look like?
Mm-hmm.
And the excerpt is actually really super interesting and it's a good flavor. I hope there's a lot more of that in the book. We'll see, because again, these are, we don't know how fleshed out they're really going to do with it, but it's good that it's there and it's something else to dig into. Another one that's really interesting is L3 and her integration with the Falcon. And actually she's having a conversation with the Falcon, and it's go read it on StarWars.com. Even if you don't buy the book, go read it on StarWars.com because it's kind of trippy. And so I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
It's kind of trippy what happens. And then finally we have Enfys Nest, and this is right after the events of Solo. So this is kind of like it looks like it's framed up as an epilogue. And just a little teaser, you're going to see 2 characters that from another Star Wars movie. So highly recommend going to check out the excerpts and see if this is something you guys might want to pick up and explore, because it's gonna give us some extra little tidbits that we were hoping we'd see or read.
Yep. And all I got to say is told you so. Yeah, you'll see it. There's some pretty good stuff in there that we've talked about here.
I thought you were above that kind of thing.
No, not at all.
No, not at all.
Nope. Not above it at all.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's and whenever that does launch, I don't have the date in front of me, but I'm definitely going to have to parse through that and pick it apart because there's a lot of good stuff I'm sure coming. So, and finally, really, it's kind of not that big of a news week. There are some leaked photos for episode 9. We've already got our first batch of them. They're out there. We're not going to talk about them here, but I know we've got a number of followers. Myself, Mike, Jonesy, I think we've corrupted you, or maybe you've self-corrupted. I don't know.
I get click happy and I just start clicking everything.
So yeah, if you're into leaks and you want to know more about episode 9, just FYI, there are some stuff that's out there already. So
it's nothing earth shattering, people. So even if you see them, it's just, scenery.
Yeah.
So it won't kill you, but if you want to stay pure, please by all means avoid it like the plague.
Yep. And I was joking before we came on the air that we've already gotten more leaked footage from episode 9 than we did with 8. So I don't know if this is a sign of things to come, that maybe that we'll get a lot more, pictures and stuff like that coming up. I guess we'll see. But again, that's already out there. We know they're well underway in filming. So we'll continue to keep our eye open. So let's get into the Crisis on Utapau story. So this again is 4 stories, 4 episodes that were never published or never released. They did the voice acting. There's music for the most part. Special sound effects are in there. But the special effects are what they call proxy animation. So they're really rough. And this is one, and I'm going to just kind of jump ahead real quick, but this is one of the, unlike Bad Batch, this particular one, there were moments where it did get in the way for me. Like it got in the way of the action. And we'll come back to that in a second. But so it's a really rough cut of all of this. There are 4 episodes. A Death on Utapau is the first one. Part 2 is In Search of the Crystal. Part 3 is Crystal Crisis, and 4 is The Big Bang. All of these are available on StarWars.com, and if you'd like to watch them, you can see them on YouTube as well. There are a number of people that have this stuff available on their sites. So where did these episodes come from? So in 2014, when they announced the Clone Wars Legacy, this is one of the ones that they, out of the gate, had kind of shared Crisis on Utapau along with Son of Dathomir and Dark Disciple. And it wasn't until later, I guess about a year later in 2015, that we got the release, or the Bad Batch release and presentation and all that. So we've been kind of jumping out of order, and really it's more like to build anticipation up. So we didn't really kind of follow in line with how these things were released. But now there is a Clone Wars Legacy video out there. And it does kind of recap the first 3, not Bad Batch, but Crisis on Utapau, Son of Dathomir, and Dark Disciple. Jonesy, I know you had a chance to recently see that, or I guess see it again. Anything that stood out that we haven't already kind of discussed in the first 2, the last 2 episodes?
Nothing in particular. It was a lot of framing up by Pablo Hidalgo and Dave Filoni and Matt Mikovets, and just, shaping up why these were important to see. And for this story arc that we're going to explore today, it was a lot of making sure that we saw the interaction between Anakin and Obi-Wan, especially with Ahsoka. And we're going to see that with In Search of the Crystal and in those moments. And that's why these are important to see, I think, more than any other reason. It's that you do get this sense of what that interaction looked like between these characters, and really some of the best moments between them. It was actually, a really good moment. So we're going to get there with it. But yeah, it was a lot of framing up, and some of the things I didn't notice or didn't know in advance of seeing this was that they actually had some unfinished scenes from Dark Disciple, which I thought was pretty cool. And some of them I recognized, but it had been a while since I'd watched this video. And so, who knows what we're going to get, but we don't know where this slotted into the overall season. And especially if we're looking at our season of 12 coming up, if we get these episodes, these can, I imagine these are probably going to be our second 4. If Bad Batch sticks to Bad Batch was originally supposed to be the season Kickstarter.
Yeah.
We're going to be the first 4 episodes of the season. So if they stick to these 4 episode arcs, that would be your first 4. Maybe this would be your second 4, and then you'd maybe have your final 4 with the Siege of Mandalore. So that's kind of where I'm going right now, because I think they will bring these up, because I think the Ahsoka aspect of the story has to be told.
Yeah.
So the siege and that reunion between Ahsoka and Anakin that we've seen in the trailer has that gravity and that weight and that meaning behind it.
Yeah. And there's that scene later on that we'll get to where Anakin, is talking about Ahsoka, and he, that would be a nice setup for the Crisis on Mandalore, or the Siege of Mandalore, and what we saw in the trailer where, she turns around and says, "Hello, Master," that whole thing. So it's almost,
exactly.
Yeah, the ghost. I mean, it's a good setup. It would be a nice way to tee this up if they indeed go down that route. But again, they may not, but it would still be very interesting to see them do this. There's also some really good stuff. So let's get into Death on Utapau. And I'm going to let you, if you don't mind, just kind of kick off the rough recap, and then we can just kind of talk about some of our, I guess, more of the more outstanding moments, or maybe some of our favorite moments that we saw in this one.
Sure. So Obi-Wan and Anakin are sent to Utapau to investigate the death of a master. So Jedi Master 2 and what makes it odd is that Utapau and the Pauans claim neutrality. We kind of heard this with the Bad Batch episodes too, right? With the Techno Union. So Obi-Wan and Anakin meet up with the inspector, who's Jen June, and Governor Blom, and they allow them to proceed, although with a lot of trepidation, because anytime the Jedi show up, it's usually a harbinger of things to come. And they continue to stress this. It threatens their peace between, I believe there's 3 tribes that generally dictate things on the planet. And so they start their investigation, and they deduce that she was assassinated by a precision laser dart. And they start to run through what could actually be possible. And some of the inhabitants of the planet are somewhat still primitive, or more primitive. They don't have the sophistication to be able to do this type of thing. They don't have the technology either. And so they deduce that it was a Magna Guard droid, which is General Grievous's preferred droid bodyguards. So they track them down. They learn that the droids are dealing with an Amani and some Sugi arms dealers. And Yoda basically tasks Obi-Wan and Anakin to start the investigation. And that's really the episode. I mean, in a nutshell, that's really all there was to it.
Mm-hmm.
So you and I, before the show, talked a little bit about the vibe of this episode. So I'm going to let you share a little bit what you thought this vibe reminded you of.
I had in my notes CSI Utapau, because if we're ever going to do a CSI type episode for Star Wars, this is it. So if you're into CSI, there's a moment in there where they're kind of really getting into, the I don't even know what that word's called, where how the murder happened and the position and all of that. They kind of trace all that back, which was kind of neat, because we didn't really get to see them. We got to see them using more of their soft skills rather than their Jedi skills to do all of that. There are some really good moments in here. I mean, I thought it was hilarious with they were asked to use discretion when they were there, and they said, "Oh yeah, don't worry, we'll be discreet." And then 4 episodes later, the whole thing, everything's pretty much blown up by the end of it all. So, but that's pretty typical, I guess, of Obi-Wan and Skywalker when they're together. I think overall, and you kind of touched on this in this episode, not so much. It's some of the later ones. They really do a good job. And when I say they, James Arnold Taylor and Matt Lantner, they do an awesome job here. This is some of their best work, and it really gives you a sense of how close both Skywalker and Kenobi are, leading right up to Revenge of the Sith. And when you put it in that perspective, it makes it even, I guess, sadder. It's
right.
Because as close as they are in this, there's a lot of banter. This is we get a lot of dry sarcasm from Obi-Wan to Anakin. We've got Anakin teasing Obi-Wan throughout all of this. And it's all good banter. Again, it's all in good sport. And you really get the sense that they're friends, they are brothers, they've got a father-son relationship, right? You get a lot of that from naturally what happens in the episodes, but then, the talents of Taylor and Lancer kind of really shine here. I think at one moment, not in this particular episode, but later on, there's a moment in there where Skywalker makes a comment about, he calls him the old man, right, being captured again. So it's a really good series of episodes if you enjoy that relationship and you want to see more of that relationship. And I think we get more of that than really, honestly, when I think back a lot of the Clone War episodes, we get it in spurts here and there, but it almost feels like they intentionally gave you these 4 episodes to show you a lot of what the relationship was between Skywalker and Kenobi. So
right, and that was the intent of releasing these episodes, was to give people that interaction. So to bring, the stories to life. So when you watch A New Hope, it just makes it all the more powerful, even Revenge of the Sith. But you just have this, like you were pointing out, this brotherly bond, and that there's a lot more to them than, this gives you the things that you thought you'd hope to see. So you get to see the relationship. You get to see how much they trusted one another too, right? And
yeah,
and we're going to see that with the second episode in the arc. But one of the items that struck me a little, it didn't disturb me, but it was just a little weird, was when they tracked the Magnet Guard down and he like commits suicide. He self-destructs.
Yeah. Had we seen that before?
I had the same exact question. I don't know that we have, or it's been a while, but to the point where it reminded me like the cyanide capsule, right? In the false tooth,
mm-hmm.
where except it's the electronic version of it. So they were trying to extract data from its mind so they could confirm what actually happened with Jedi Master Tuan. And so, but I just don't remember seeing a time where a droid committed suicide in order to stop its processor. I mean, it makes sense. You have a self-destruct on a lot of things, right? But I don't know why it struck me this time as something worth noting.
Yeah, and most of this episode, again, really, it's just setting up all of the other ones. I'm trying to think of some really other kind of standout moments for this one. The only other thing that I guess was that we should mention is Tuan. They had mentioned that Tuan was the Jedi that was killed, and that she was very much like Qui-Gon Jinn, more of a maverick kind of personality.
Right.
It makes me think of Voss, since we just kind of came off of that as well. But really, there's from the beginning, we get this MacGuffin in this Kyber crystal. So the whole episode from here on out is, it's about the relationship and between those two and all that. But underlying all of this is the MacGuffin story of, there's a Kyber crystal that's out there, and they don't know there's a weapon. And at least in this episode, they find out there's a weapon, and they're trying to get this, in search of and try to either destroy it or get it out of Grievous's hands in some way.
The confusion is they don't understand why they would have arms dealers and what kind of connection they'd have to the Separatists.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where they're at now. They're trying to figure out, they really don't know what's going on. And so now they're going to hire David Caruso to come in here and figure this thing out with glasses and all. So let's go ahead and get into In Search of the Crystal. So the second episode in this arc. And so Anakin and Obi-Wan discover this Amani warrior camp, and they find the precision laser darts. They're using against them. They're able to deflect them and disarm them. So they escape, but Obi-Wan finds a set of footprints. And as they start this journey, they have to set up camp for the night. So while they're in this, I guess, while they're walking and whatnot, Anakin just kind of falls into old habits and just says, "Hey, I'm going to call Ahsoka and she'll have this right." And then he stops short, and there's this uncomfortable silence between them. And Obi-Wan tries to interject, and Anakin tries to shut the conversation down.
Yeah.
So we're going to explore this in more detail here in a few minutes. But they have this conversation that's really amazing. So they end up camping for the night, and they're then ambushed while they're asleep by some Suki warriors, and they claim to be Outer Rim arms dealers there to buy weapons. And this is Anakin and Obi-Wan. So they're taken to the Suki leader of Endente, who assumes they're there to purchase the crystal. And so this is the first time we get the crystal referenced. But of course, the crystal's already promised to General Grievous. And so they just say, okay, well, we'll double that offer. So Endente contacts Dooku to report what's going on. He's clearly not going to go against Grievous because Grievous will kill him. And but Dooku says, kill him immediately. Don't mess around. Just take him out. And the Jedi, of course, respond. They take the Suki warriors out, and then they actually discover hanging from the rafters a giant Kyber crystal.
Yeah. And I think it ends with them loading that up and then firing up the engines as they're about to escape or try to escape. But we'll soon find out that doesn't really happen because the engines are sabotaged.
Right.
So overall,
let's dig into that conversation.
What's that?
Let's dig into that conversation with Ahsoka, or about Ahsoka.
Yeah, because this is really the most. I mean, there's a lot of other. We'll get into Endente in a minute because I like James Hong, but this is really the moment of this episode, and it's a great exchange. And I think you did a really good job of setting it up, but it's Anakin thinking, oh, like I can call Ahsoka and she can help, and then he just stops. And when Obi-Wan questions him, he basically says, "What's there to talk about?" And he says, "Nothing, I suppose." That's Obi-Wan responding. But Obi-Wan gets a sense that, hey, he's got some grief that he still has not dealt with in, Ahsoka, leaving, and he drops it kind of then, but he does wait. I mean, he's probably going to come back and visit this. Sure enough, he does later that night when they're setting up camp and they're kind of sitting around the fire. You get this really good 5-minute moment where they're kind of going back and forth. And again, Kenobi, I'm 100% sure that he knows that Anakin's never dealt with this grief and he's trying to get something out of it. And he's angry. He lashes out and says he misses her. He's like, "I miss her. Okay." He can't understand how the Jedi Order was okay with, leaving her. They basically, in his mind, forced her out of the Jedi Order. And Obi-Wan kind of turns around and says, "No, they didn't do anything. Yeah, there were mistakes that were made and, false accusations and all that. But at the end of the day, she made that decision. And she made that decision to leave the Jedi Order because she let her emotions get the better part of her, which goes against the Jedi code. She should have never put herself in this position." And I'm paraphrasing all of this, but she should have never put herself in a position, emotionally, that would have led her to leave the Jedi Order. Again, in Anakin's mind, she didn't have a choice, right? She was a victim here. And this was all of this, really. I mean, it's almost kind of like he's blaming the Jedi Council for having done that.
I mean, that's the thing, though. He's absolutely right.
No, I'm not disagreeing at all, really.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those times where Anakin. I mean, it's clear as day, what happened, and we'll get there. So the importance of the scene, to this point, is that Obi-Wan cares, right? We've given Obi-Wan some slack of, does he really care? Or the Jedi, I think more so than Obi-Wan, but the Jedi in general, do they care about one another and their losses? And do they help them through those times of need? And I think this is an example of where, they do, or at least Obi-Wan is trying. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult. Anakin, he forms these attachments with people and they become very, very strong bonds. I mean, including with Obi-Wan, right? And so for Obi-Wan to try to reach out and ask him, do you want to talk about it? Those are difficult. I mean, it's difficult for Anakin to talk about it anyway, but at least he's trying. He didn't just abandon him and leave him to burn. I mean, wait, sorry, that did happen. But he didn't, he's not emotionally abandoning him at this point.
Sorry.
Yeah, is it too soon?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we're not there yet. Okay. But, so it's still important for us to see that and know that this wasn't a Obi-Wan's not blind to those types of emotions. We know he's not because of Satine, right? And we know that he cares about Anakin because we see that in Revenge of the Sith. But Anakin is absolutely right. And this is where, Obi-Wan is still blinded by the code, if you will, of that the Jedi really did leave her hung out to dry. They didn't give her the support she needed. They were quick to assume guilt. And Anakin's absolutely right to call them out on that and to have that pent up frustration. It's good that it's great to see him get it out too, right? And to see this discussion between him and Obi-Wan. And Obi-Wan, he understands. I think he feels that way too, but he's not able to actually get it out.
Yeah, and there's one moment in there where he tells Anakin that, he says, you can't take responsibility for Ahsoka's decision. And it's there that we get the second part of this conversation, which is probably just as important. It's some very eerie foreshadowing that happens. But Anakin asks Obi-Wan, how would you feel if I turned into a major disappointment? And he says, you took me under your wing, you raised me. And he says, how would you sleep knowing that I failed you? And at this point, the conversation's kind of pretty much over. Obi-Wan's kind of rolling over, trying to end it, but he says, not very well, I would imagine, meaning that I wouldn't take that very well if I knew that you failed me. But then goes on to say, luckily that isn't true and never will be. So we know that to be the complete and total opposite. Yeah. That he
Obi, you never use absolutes.
Right, you don't speak in absolutes.
Right.
But yeah, that was, and that's kind of how the scene ends, and you see that, and it's like, wow, this is all going to come to head in fruition here at some point.
I was really surprised we didn't get like an ominous Imperial March theme.
Yeah,
at that point, because usually
slow.
They've done those types of sounds and music when we've had those heavier moments that are foreshadowing. So it was a little surprising we didn't get that.
So do you really think that Obi-Wan meant that in that moment, or was this just to placate him? And
I think Obi-Wan always, while he views Anakin as quick to judgment, quick to action, I think he always assumes Anakin will come to the right decision, because generally speaking, he does. When we saw it in Attack of the Clones, when Padme goes overboard and Anakin wants to go after her, and Obi-Wan, yells some sense into him about what she would do, he refocuses.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he doesn't focus all the way, but he always seems to get himself where he needs to be in order to take care of what he needs to take care of. And so I think Obi-Wan does have this very, rose-colored view of Anakin, that he, amidst all of his flaws, he's a Jedi and he will always make the right decision. But I mean, I don't think Obi-Wan's so naive to think that he is not above striking out on his own or leaving the order, though.
Yeah, let's get into, there's a couple moments, and we kind of skipped over one, and maybe we can just talk about a couple of these, but there are moments in here where Anakin gets pretty dark. And I don't know if this is, I'm really trying to think back now on some of the latter seasons, and he had moments, and he's always had these moments like this, but there's one moment in here where, he gives a lot of smirks, even with the proxy animation, you can kind of see it. He gives a lot of smirks. He kills that Sugi in like cold blood, where,
right.
The one's looking at the lightsaber and you see him move his hand. He ignites the saber using the Force, and he doesn't really even bat an eye. And Kenobi's like, all he says is, was that necessary? So this is after they've been captured. Sorry, I probably should have prefaced this, but this is right after they get captured in the morning, and they're kind of walking with the Sugis. And one of them picks up the lightsaber, and he's kind of looking at it, eyeballing, almost like a porg kind of thing. And that's when Anakin ignites it with the Force, almost kind of toying with him. He thinks it's funny. That poor dude dies. And again, Kenobi just says, was that necessary? And that's really it. They just kind of leave it at that. But that's, if you think about it, that's pretty dark. This guy just killed, him out of cold blood. It just seems very uncharacteristic. And maybe not for Anakin, definitely for the Jedi. But again, there are other moments in here where he's doing things and saying things that are kind of dark. And so, it's probably a no-brainer that this was the intent. They're kind of trying to show some of this early transition stuff, or just how close to the line he's either still riding or is about to cross.
Right.
Any other ones, I guess? We'll probably get to some more here in a second, but did you pick up on this?
One that was kind of cool, though, was when the guy had both Obi-Wan and Anakin's lightsaber, and Anakin activated both of them.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of carved him up. Now, I mean, that's pretty brutal, but still, that was pretty awesome. And even Obi-Wan was like,
impressive.
Okay, that was impressive.
Yeah, I think that was in The Big Bang, I think, the last episode. But yeah.
It?
Yeah, I think so.
That was in this one.
Maybe.
Oh, well.
I don't know. We'll get to it.
Doesn't matter. Yeah,
folks,
folks,
it is in this one. You're right. It is.
These are how these episodes run. It's like they're chased, they're captured, they're chased, they're captured. So it's a lot of back and forth. So if we get them out of order, you have to forgive us a little bit.
You're right. It is. It's a little bit later in this episode. But let's talk about Indente. Because Indente is played by James Hong. So if you're not familiar with James Hong, he is an Asian actor. He played Hannibal Chu in Blade Runner. He's like the Mr. Frost of that movie, if you've ever seen that. His biggest role, I think, is probably Lopan from Big Trouble in Little China from '86, and then he was Mr. Ping in Kung Fu Panda. So I think he's the dad, right? The adopted dad, not his real one. But are you a fan? Are you a fan?
I might have to take your word on that last one. I don't know.
Oh, really? Yeah, he's in there. You know this guy. If you've ever seen any movie with him, he's got that very distinct voice. But there's one line in there where he says, "Show me the money. Show me the money." Which I thought was awesome. But anyways, I got super excited when he came on there because I think he's a great actor. He's a lot of fun.
Well, they needed someone to keep it going because the rest of the warriors didn't really speak, and they were portrayed as not educated or intellectual at all. Yeah. So there had to be something. So I liked how he rode around on the back of the Amani, though.
Yeah, I mean, he's a comic relief for this for sure, which they needed again because, like you said, it was not only was it a little bit slow here in this episode, especially the next one that we got coming up, but even the characters that did speak, they were their voices were. There was only one Sugi that actually spoke, if I'm not mistaken, and the Amani don't even speak. I mean, it's all primitive language kind of stuff. So he was much needed. There is one scene that comes up right after this too, where they're approaching the shuttle, and he says, "That's no mound, that's a spaceship." I don't know if you caught that, but I think that was a direct reference to "That's no moon." That's that kind of thing,
right? Yeah, they had the tarp over the.
Yep.
I don't know how he knew that was a spaceship. To be honest with you,
I don't think he did. Again, I think that was in there. Literally, that line was in there to say, "Hey, guess what? There's a throwback line to episode."
Yeah, these
4.
episodes have so many of those. A lot of callbacks, and I wonder if they were placeholders more than anything else. But I mean, they were voice acted, so clearly they maybe intended to leave them in there.
Yeah. We get a lot more sarcasm, banter, snarky comments from both of those guys in here. And then we get a really cool John Woo moment with Anakin where he's in the hallway, like you mentioned, but he ends up picking up some blasters and he goes guns blazing. And I can't recall, it's been a while since I've seen all of the Clone War episodes, but I don't recall a Clone Wars episode to this, I guess, in this way where he's got the dual blasters and he's just going to town, killing all kinds of people like that. Which is a really neat kind of thing, I guess, for Anakin to see that he's both, he's got good skills with the lightsaber and blasters as well. And that's where we get that moment.
It was fun. It gave it that little Western type flavor too, right?
Yeah.
So it just a little variety in the scene.
So yeah, they get into the shuttle, they fire up the engines, and that's kind of how it ends. And let's talk about Crystal Crisis. We may not have a lot to discuss here, but what happens in the next episode, part 3 here?
This was basically just one long chase scene. So it's really more or less getting the crystal from point A to point B so we can have our finale. But we do see the power of the crystals start, why this thing is so important. Because to this point, Anakin and Obi-Wan really don't know, what is possible with this thing. And so as the Powans and as these other groups or I'm sorry, not the Powans, but as Indente's forces are chasing, they're shooting at the crystal, and all of a sudden when they hit it, it starts refracting and reflecting. And so we're getting these blaster bolts back to their originators or sparsing all over the place, and they're causing all sorts of havoc. And so now they're like, stop shooting the crystal, stop shooting the crystal. And so, but the Powans finally, we come back to the Powans and they finally admit that they actually really are working with Grievous and Dooku. And again, we're skipping a lot here, but Grievous ends up executing Indente because he knew that he's just out for himself anyway. He's not going to deal with that kind of stuff. And Grievous is going to take control of the crystal and leaves on his ship. Grievous kills Governor Blum as well. And we're just eliminating all the Powans, which can pave the way for Revenge of the Sith of who's left, I suppose. And then Anakin and Obi-Wan have to steal a ship. And then we've got kind of a space chase as they chase after the crystal and Grievous. And that's basically the episode. It was really just kind of a moving from A to B and getting the pieces in place.
This was probably, I don't know your opinion of this, but it was probably the funnier of the 3 episodes. There's a lot of jokes in here, like throughout, even though they're not doing much in the way of action. But this is where we get a lot of, again, more snarkiness, banter back and forth between Anakin and Kenobi. There really weren't any like huge moments in here. I mean, you could make the argument that the way Grievous kills Indente was pretty brutal. I mean, he beheads him, and you get to see that. Kind of see his head fall off to the side there, or at least his helmet, which is sad because that character was the comic relief, and then they kind of foreshadowed this in the last episode because Dooku is at one point is talking to Indente, and he says when General Grievous arrives, he will give you what you deserve, and you hear that, and you're like, oh, he's dead. There's it's going to happen. But yeah, he dies in a pretty glorious way. He gets his head cut off. But other than that, I'm trying to think where we had we got a hello there at one point. Hello there.
Right.
We got that. That was kind of cool.
This is the challenge I've had with Clone Wars at times, though, is that we have these story arcs and they want to make them a certain length or show us certain aspects of relationships and whatever, but it's just too much. It goes on, it has one show in there that you maybe didn't need and you could have tightened it up a little bit to where it just feels like, a little bit of filler. And for me, this episode was very much that, at least with the introduction episode we had, it was setting up why they were there and what they were starting to look for and kind of the mystery unfolds type. This is very much just a, chase and position type of thing, which is, to me, is just not as interesting as some of the other aspects of it. And then they tried to get some nice banter and I thought it was okay, but these are the episodes that I remember when I was watching Clone Wars as it came out, these were the ones I was more disappointed in. And I didn't, it made me lose a little bit of interest. And I was like, okay, we're going to get a lot of these, or is this just a one-off type of thing? But that was my one critical point of the Clone Wars in general, was we had some of these episodes, and looking back on them, some of them I like more so than others, but this was one of those that, I would probably never watch it a second time.
And that towards the end, we do get a little bit more action than the first, 15 minutes of the episode. But this is where the blocking was cool, but the lack of animation, the lack of detail in the animation really made it hard to kind of follow. I mean, not to say you can't follow it, it just wasn't as exciting. I think it had been polished and all of that. This is where the special effects really kind of make or break some of those scenes.
That's totally fair. Yeah, I mean, and that's a great point. If this was finished and you had more of the dynamic aspects of them flipping around and things going bad and, the cart, starting to break down and things like that, all those things would have been, would have helped this scene quite a bit.
All right, let's do the Big Bang. So I think you said we left off. They get into the shuttle takes off with the crystal. They jump into their own kind of transport and give chase, and that's kind of how it ends. Where do we pick up with the Big Bang?
Right. So Obi-Wan and Anakin are pursuing the crystal, and so Grievous decides to hop in his starfighter, which we saw in Revenge
I love
of the
that
Sith.
design too, by the way.
It is so cool. I mean, the design elements of that are really neat. So they're chasing him. He's shooting after them, and they chase it to a CIS frigate. So Anakin and Obi-Wan get separated though. So they, Grievous is taking out the ship slowly but surely, and they have to jump in escape pods. And when they do the escape pods, Anakin has a hatch problem rather. And so they discharge at different times. And so they're separated. And of course, Kenobi has the worst luck with these things and basically lands in a room full of droids. So we get our first Grievous Kenobi duel with lightsabers. But it's pretty disappointing because Grievous wins with really not a whole lot of effort.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Grievous decides to report back to Dooku's he's like, why are you waiting? Execute Kenobi and get the crystal to Sereno. don't delay, don't mess around. And this is one of the things I like it when the leaders don't, say, well, go find Skywalker and then do all these other things. It's like, no, kill him and get over here now. You can have someone else do the killing. Just get over here and let's get this thing in motion. So the one weird part of this episode, and I'm curious as your take, is so they go to get Kenobi and they're going to take him to execute him because we don't just shoot people, right then and there because that's way too efficient.
Right.
So Obi-Wan starts reciting the Yavin code that basically a prisoner has to be blindfolded and all of these accords, from generations ago to the droids in an effort to confuse them. And, they are thoroughly confused by it. They didn't know what he was talking about. And so this is where Anakin jumps back in and is able to rescue him. And so they run and they find the crystal together. But then we get a giant spider droid, which opens fire on it, which of course creates a massive discharge of energy that, rocks the ship. And that's where Grievous knows they've got a problem. So Grievous goes with some of his favorite Magna guards there to confront Obi-Wan and Anakin. And while Anakin's holding him off, Obi-Wan starts jumping at all of these tanks and starts firing at the crystal in order to overload and destroy the crystal. And so Grievous is about the only one that escapes because the impact of this explosion from the crystal it takes out the primary ship as well as pretty much everything, all the other ships around it. And so our episode basically ends there, but we get a little epilogue moment where Yoda starts recounting how the Sith have used Kyber crystals in the past to power super weapons, which of course was a very foreboding topic because that's exactly what Sidious did. And they start to postulate that this might be what they're trying to do. And that's very concerning indeed. So then that's basically how the episode ends.
So let's jump back up to the beginning because I do want to cover one thing. Like I really enjoyed the space battle. I thought it was great, even with this the blocking or the animation that was there. It was pretty thrilling. Like this is some of the cooler stuff that I remember in Clone Wars, and I really hope that if they go back and do this as part of the next season, this is kept in there because I thought it was just a very cool segment. The way it was blocked and it was very intense. It builds. They kept adding more to it. It felt very Star Wars-y for me at the beginning, which was really neat. A
lot of good banter between Obi-Wan and Anakin again.
Yeah. He's like, I'm better at it. That's all. When he's talking about being cavalier. But I don't understand. Like, I do. I get it. But why didn't Grievous just kill Kenobi? He had him right there. I did not understand why, realistically he would have even kept him at that point, knowing Grievous. He'd already just murdered two people for, pretty much at the drop of a hat. So why wouldn't he have killed Kenobi? And it took Dooku to be the voice of reason with Grievous to tell him to go back and execute him. Any thoughts aside from that? It would have really screwed up the plot if they had killed him.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah. All right. Well,
it's hard to overthink some of that, and you can't get in your own way. I think when you're analyzing some of these, but yeah, I don't know.
The Yavin code was interesting. I guess it was. I mean, it plays out like the Geneva Convention, I guess,
right.
In our real world type terms. But it was funny that they mentioned that, and he's like, all prisoners are to be blindfolded before executed. And you would think that was it. Like they didn't have to give you any more than that. But then when, Anakin rescues him, he makes mention of, oh, you were using the Yavin code again, huh? And, Kenobi says, yeah, or whatever. And he says that Yavin convention code is like 1,000 years old.
Right.
So they were giving you like background on it, which, okay, that's kind of interesting, but it just felt out of place. I don't know. Again, if it was just an Easter egg kind of thing or not, and maybe I'm missing something. I don't remember anything from KOTOR or any of that stuff, but
well, it did feel out of place, but at the same time, this is like totally Obi-Wan. I mean, he does this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
he is the negotiator after all.
Right.
So yeah, he always has these weird random things in his head. And so he always thinks he can talk his way out of pretty much any circumstance. So while it was awkward moment, it's not all that. I thought it was still more or less in character form. Yeah. It was just the implementation of it for the episode was just a little weird.
Yeah.
But the one thing that was cool though is when Anakin sees this, and you mentioned this earlier, when Anakin sees him on this little display that he's captured, because again they got separated here. he taps the screen, and I think he said, "Captured again, old man."
Yeah, got yourself captured again, old man.
Yeah. So again, that was a weird line too, I thought, but it was still funny. I still found myself chuckling a little bit at it.
And right after he rescues him, Anakin rescues Kenobi. We get the callback to Attack of the Clones, where he hands Obi-Wan the lightsaber, and he tells him, "This weapon is your life," which I think Kenobi replies back, "Oh, so you are listening to me," and he replies back with only the good stuff or something like that. So
right,
it was a really cool moment. Again, there's just so many of these, honestly, throughout all 4 of the episodes. There's a really cool moment when they're pushing around this big Kyber crystal, and there's one moment where they're pushing it down the hallway, and you can almost hear the yakety sax from Benny Hill playing in the background, but they kind of look over, and Grievous is standing there, and they just kind of smirk at him like, "Hi, how are you doing?" And they're pushing this huge crystal down the hallway, and got a million droids chasing them. That was kind of cool. The other thing I guess that we should mention is in season 4, and so let me jump ahead to the very end, because this isn't the first. Well, in Clone Wars, this is the first time we've seen a Kyber crystal of this size, and it should be no surprise to anyone that they are going to try to weaponize this in the Death Star. We already know all of this from the movies and some of the stuff, the little things that you saw in the background with like the plans and all that. But so they're trying to weaponize this large Kyber crystal. And I couldn't help but think of season 4 Rebels. There's an episode called In the Name of Rebellion. This is the episode that had Saw Gerrera in it. And Ezra and him are kind of running around, and we find out there that they have another Kyber crystal that's just as big. It looks very similar. I went back and looked at it just to make sure, but it's very similar. And there's one particular line that stands out for me in that Rebels episode where Saw Gerrera, I believe it's Saw Gerrera, or maybe it's Kanan, says this isn't the first time this is now the second time, Kanan says, that they've stopped the Empire from trying to weaponize a Kyber crystal like this. And so I don't know if this is a direct callback to this particular episode or not. But it would.
I'm on board with that.
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense. But I thought that was kind of neat that they were able to tie that. So even though we never technically saw this episode in the Clone Wars when it originally aired, Dave Filoni always had it in his mind that he wanted to, that it had happened, and we heard that from Pablo in that video you mentioned. That for them, a lot of these creators, even though these things never did air, the stories are true, and they use them to build upon other stories. And so that was a good example of, I think, where we saw that.
So let me ask you a question then. So of all the secrets that the Jedi Order kept over the years, and I'm assuming they kept a lot.
Yoda does.
Is this, you think this would be one that they would not keep a secret and then they would share with Kanan, who at this time would have been a fairly young Padawan still?
I don't know that they shared it. My guess is maybe, through Kanan's training, or I guess, him snooping around or talking to folks, he might have came up with it. I don't know that he was kind of on the inner circle and would have seen this or heard about it when it first happened, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess he wouldn't be that young, but he would have been old enough to understand. I just didn't, to me, this seems like a master's only type of, knowledge.
Right. It would have. I don't think he was in that inner circle. Maybe somebody handed that down to him at some point. Who that is, I don't know. Maybe it's Ahsoka, right? Maybe she mentioned it to him. Who knows? But there is. I want to go back to the Yoda thing too. He's obviously been keeping this to himself, because even Windu isn't aware. And that last part of that scene is actually really neat. And he mentions that of stories of old and long times forgotten, when the Jedi and Sith were in control of the galaxy, that there was weapons of unimaginable power, and always at the heart of Kyber crystal was just like the one you described. And Anakin says these are children's stories, fairy tales, stuff that people have talked about, but just never they were never thought to be real. And then Yoda makes a reference here. He says, "In legends, we often find great truths, Skywalker." And the way he says legends, it almost makes you feel like, okay, they're talking about Star Wars legends and all the stuff that had happened before then, particularly with Knights of the Old Republic and some of the stuff that we saw there. But the really cool moment is at the very end that he says that, if find one of these crystals, he can, another will he seek, he being Palpatine. So, Yoda is very much aware that this is just the first of several crystals, and he's got to have a good sense at this point that if they really are going to try to repeat history, then yeah, that the Death Star itself. I mean, we had Star Destroyers, and I mean literally Star Destroyers in the old Legend stuff, and other massive weapons that use Kyber crystals. So he had all this in his mind. He was well aware of it. I'm not going to blame him for not doing anything more than what he did, but it was a cool kind of moment for them to reference, I guess, the Legend stuff. And
it was a good little epilogue in general, though. I liked that part.
I think that's pretty much it for the Crisis on Utapau arc. I mean, overall, I guess you kind of kicked it off with your initial overall thoughts, but anything else come to you in terms of kind of final thoughts there?
It's a pretty straightforward story, so it didn't have a lot of, what you saw is what you got, but the Anakin Obi-Wan dynamic was a really great moment. We really needed that, I think. We're desperately looking to see how Anakin processed Ahsoka leaving, and we've really had nothing to explore that. And so I'm hoping we'll get a little more of this dynamic with Obi-Wan specifically, or maybe some other character would be interesting as well. Maybe even like a Voss would be kind of cool too, I think.
Yeah.
Someone that he can relate to a little bit, but so that when they come back to Siege of Mandalore, it means a little bit more. But overall, pretty straightforward story. A lot of good banter between it. I did like the banter. I thought it was a little too long. 4 episodes was probably just a little too much. Probably could have done this in 3. But overall, not too bad. A good bonus material. I think this was also on the Blu-ray of Lost Missions, so good extra content. But overall enjoyable, but not some of my favorite Clone Wars work, but not bad either.
Yeah, I would agree. I enjoyed them. They're if you can get past all the animation, that's hurdle number 1. If you can get past maybe some of the slower moments in Crystal Crisis and enjoy in the relationship between Anakin and Kenobi, I think if you have not seen these already, it's probably worth watching. I mean, they're quick. I mean, there's 22 minutes a piece. You can get through all of these in just over an hour, so it's not a huge time commitment. Yeah. And I think there's
definitely worth a watch.
Yeah. I mean, and they were needed. There's a lot of stuff that they're trying to do. You get what Filoni was trying to do with a lot of these story arcs, and there's some important moments that happen. That if you are a big fan of the Star Wars, Clone Wars stuff, or even just some of these characters, I think you owe it to yourself to go back and take a look at them, at least watch them, and it doesn't cost you a dime. So
right, and it really set up, like you mentioned with Rebels, it really set up, before Rebels was a thing, the whole Kyber crystal, and start to link that in with Revenge, or with what we start to see constructed Revenge of the Sith, and then what we end up seeing in A New Hope. So it was really important to see some of those elements manifest themselves so that we have an idea of these things that fit into the larger world. And I think that's one of the more fun things that Clone Wars has been able to deliver, is that even in small moments, we do get those impressions of what's to come and a little bit of that backstory. So I'm glad we get these things,
And speaking of things to come, so next week we are going to hit Son of Dathomir. So this is the Darth Maul comic that again was part of the Clone Wars legacy and was originally supposed to be part of that the last season before it was canceled. And we'll dive into that. And after that, we are going to do a listener feedback. So we should be soliciting that if we haven't already on social media. If you're in Discord, you'll get a chance to kind of post some questions. And after we come back from that, we will end with Rex. And I think we are planning that to be 2 parts. So we'll have 2 weeks back to back where we'll be covering Rex. And again, still sweating bullets in terms of what the heck we're going to cover there, because that guy's got a lot of history. So, and yeah, I guess that's it for this episode. Any final thoughts before we go?
No, I'm excited to finally jump into the Darth Maul comic. So my first time, I haven't read it before. So super excited to dig into that one.
Yeah, it's got some good moments, and it's Darth Maul, but it's also you get some more Night Sisters in there, and Mother Talzin.
Yeah, Mother Talzin.
Yeah,
right?
So you're gonna get to see her, or we get more of her, more than we ever did, I think, in the Clone Wars. So which is really nice.
All right, well, don't spoil it for me. Don't spoil it.
All right, yeah. We'll end it there. So we'll see you guys in next week.
See you next week.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.